long ago, I got an email from a gentleman who asked for some help losing weight. And this is a matter that's near and dear to my own heart because I know what it's like to weigh more than you want to. It's something I struggled with as a kid, and it took me way longer than it should have to figure out how to fix that. And I deeply value the opportunities I have to share that with other people because it's something that no one should have to suffer from. So let's talk about this. And I named this Freedom from the Bondage of Overeating. I did that with some thought because it is bondage. You feel like you're trapped. You feel like you're in this gravitational pull that you try all these things and nothing seems to work. And it's just so frustrating. And I said it's bondage of overeating, not being overweight. Because that's the problem. And that's part of the problem is that we don't talk about the problem. We act like it's a disease. It's not a disease. It's not cancer. It's not a mystery. It's really dang simple. And that's step one, is to realize that this is a light switch. This is not a mystery. If I said, go turn on the lights in the dark room, you'd walk right to the light switch in your house and you turn on the light. You don't have to sit there and get into this existential crisis of, how do I create light? This isn't the beginning of the world. You don't have to do some mysterious, powerful thing. It's the simplest thing in the world. And you don't have to believe me. Go on the internet. If you do a YouTube search for weight loss, yes, there are these freakish fitness model type people. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about normal people who found the light switch. And you'll see over and over again that there are all these people who did it. I mean, look at this guy. Fasting worked so well for him that he actually regrew his arm. So I don't know why he doesn't have an arm here. And he does here. Maybe there's someone there and got edited out. Anyway, but this is real. Okay? You can really do this. And the whole presentation, there's a lot to talk about. I have scriptures I want to go over. This is a spiritual problem. It's not a physical problem. But just to give you the bottom line up front, here's the light switch. Weight loss is an equation. It's not a mystery. It's a very simple thing. The answer, the solution, is fasting. 1 pound of fat, it's about, if you know how much 1 pound of butter is, you can put your 2 hands together. That's just about the volume of 1 pound of fat. So every chunk on your body that you want to lose that's that big, that's 1 day of fasting, give or take. That's the equation. There's an on-ramp to this. I'll explain this in a minute. It takes time to start burning fat. It takes 24 hours. But that's it. It's 1 day plus 1 day times the number of pounds you want to lose. That's all there is to it. Okay? Now, let's get into the spiritual side of this. It's a spiritual problem. That's why I spend so much time talking about this, because it really steals people's joy. And they feel like they're trapped. And it's a spiritual problem. It's a physical symptom of a spiritual problem. God cares if you're fat. Okay? God cares if you're fat. Now, before we go any further, God cares about a lot of things. He cares anytime you're living in a way that deviates from the best way possible. And so we can't just talk about every single thing that could possibly be better in every presentation. So the good news is the principles that we talk about here do apply to every situation. So let me make the case that God cares if you're fat. The first reason is because he wants you to be free. You are a slave to anything you feel like you cannot control. The only thing he wants you to be a slave to is him. If something else has a higher priority in your life than what you sincerely believe he would have you do, you are in the bondage of sin. So in this presentation, I'm going to give you the key to free yourself from the bondage of sin in this dimension of being overweight. But the principles are the same for everything. In Romans 6:16, we read, "Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are, to whom ye obey, whether of sin unto death, or of obedience unto righteousness." And then in 1 Corinthians 6:12, Paul says, "All things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any." You can say that your weight doesn't matter to God, but if you can't control it, if it's not what you want it to be, if it's not fully your decision and you're not happy about it, then it does matter to God. Now, here's a good place for me to make this point. Let's say that you do not think that you're at your ideal body weight. Is it possible for you to still be fully satisfied with that and for there to be nothing wrong with that? Absolutely. But it depends on how intentional that decision is and how free you feel to change it. I had a discussion a long time ago with a person about a certain substance which some people find addictive. And this person thought it was a really big deal if people used this one substance or not. And I said, well, here's the question. Can they drop it cold turkey or not? And if they can't, then there's a problem. But if they're doing it intentionally with a purpose and the purpose is good, then there's no problem. If you're under the power of the thing is a problem. The only thing you should be under the power of is God. Second reason this matters to God is because he wants you to be happy. If you are not happy with your weight, then God is not happy with you. If you are not happy with your weight, God is not happy with you. These things, we have to say them. They're hard to hear, but they're true. And you can't get out of a situation that you don't first correctly perceive. You'll never do what's necessary because it'll be minimized. We don't help people by lying to them and minimizing the consequences of their negative actions. You can only help them by telling them the truth. Now, ideally, it's in a situation like this where you're letting them know the truth while you're giving them the tools to come out of the situation. Because the good news is this is easy, folks. That's why it's so sad. Because it never has to be this way. It's the easiest thing in the world to come out of. So there's the case of you not being happy. And I will now bring up, this is a good part to bring this up, this question of body dysmorphia, of there are people who are super skinny who still think they're fat. And that's also not pleasing to God, but that's a different problem. It is another manifestation of dishonesty, which is what this problem is, and we'll get to that. So many of the problems in this world are actually just dishonesty. The reason that's really difficult to fix is because in most cases, it's not a specific thing you're being dishonest about. Dishonesty is one of these properties where it's holistic. It will show up in many different ways in your life. And you can't do spot reduction on dishonesty. You have to holistically become an honest person to always face and speak and do what's true. So another reason God cares about you being overweight is because other people care about you being overweight. And it will absolutely positively affect your life, your interactions with other people. I showed you these pictures of these folks here. In all these videos, you know what people say? I can't believe how much differently people treated me after I lost weight. Well, fancy that. Now, most people will respond to that saying, man, people are shallow. They shouldn't care. That's really silly. Yes, a lot of people are shallow. And yes, that's a bad reason to treat someone differently. under certain circumstances. What? Well, I'm going to tell you why we should care if people are fat. Why we should treat them differently. Now again, I'm going to hearken back to what I said a minute ago. Sin is sin. A whole lot of sins are not visible from the outside. That doesn't make them any better or worse than the ones that are visible from the outside. Sin is sin. Okay? But you absolutely should recognize this in people. And you should treat them differently. Why? One, because being overweight is blasphemy. What? It is. Let me read this to you. Matthew 5. Skipped ahead. You might want to quote this passage from 1 Peter 3 to me. This is the NRSV. Do not adorn yourselves outwardly by braiding your hair and by wearing gold ornaments or fine clothing. Rather, let your adornment be the inner self with the lasting beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very precious in God's sight. You know, fat people will say no one should care what I look like on the outside. They should just treat me like they treat everyone else. And then they'll buy designer jeans and put on makeup. Or if they're men, they'll still have a nice job and a nice car and all the trappings of success. They'll still shower. They'll lift, whatever. So should it matter or shouldn't it? Because if you wear nice clothes and put on perfume and stuff or cologne or whatever, then you're playing the game that it does matter. Flip this around. Do you care for other people? Because overweight people, they still care what other people look like. It's not like they go and date homeless people. Right? I remember one day having a fun conversation with a young lady who was telling me that there was a guy, this was in some state where they don't let you pump your own gas. And there was an attendant at the gas station hitting on her. And she was like, oh, he was so cute. I said, did he get your number or something like that? Did you go on a date with him? And she goes, I'd never date a guy working at a gas station. I said, you're unemployed. What the heck? Talk about double standard, right? All right. So where do I get off saying that being overweight is blasphemous? Matthew 5. Ye are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and to be trodden under the foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on an hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And then Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6:19, what? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? There's several good pieces to that one. So let's tear this apart. Now, there are a lot of people out there that correctly point to people who spend too much time in the gym and fuss way too much about their weight. And they have a point. On the other side of this, we cannot use those same arguments to justify overeating, continuously overeating, because that's what it takes to get fat. We're not talking about the difference between eating normally and spending your life in the gym. We're talking about the difference between eating normally and continuously overeating. If you make your body, which is the temple of God, into an idol through spending way too much time focusing on all that, that's bad. And then the pendulum swings through where we should be over to the other side when you make your body a grotesque deformation of the beauty that God intended it to be. Your body is not your own. It's a gift from God on loan so that you can use it to demonstrate his light to other people. You are meant to take care of it while you have it. How do you know the difference between enough and too much? It's all about prioritization and where you are putting things. If you're putting diet or exercise or anything else, makeup, whatever, ahead of things that are more important than that, if you're spending 8 hours a day in the gym and you can't have kids because you're in the gym all the time, that's a great indication that it's too high a priority. If you're overweight, it's too low of a priority, unless you're doing something that's more important than that. And by the way, having kids is not an excuse. Anything in normal life is not an excuse. If you work 150 hours a week, saving the lives of one-legged orphans or something, then we could talk about that. You know, if you're in combat 24/7 and you're eating MREs, gaining weight, we could talk about that. But normal life is not an excuse to be overweight. Your priorities are wrong if that's the case. So we made the case that, I didn't define blasphemy. I'm sorry for people who are new to this channel. Blasphemy means to make God's goodness less obvious. It's the opposite of glorify. So to blaspheme is to treat God as if he's less good, or to live your life as if God were less good than he is. And we're made in his image. So if you had a picture of God and then you smeared ketchup all over it or something, or you just threw it on the floor, that would be blaspheming it, right? So you don't go into a church and start ripping things up. You'd get kicked out. So if your body is made in the image of God, you need to take care of it. You shouldn't just look like a bum all the time or gain 400 pounds. It's blasphemous. It's also idolatry. To be overweight is idolatrous. This is, I think, an even bigger one. No pun intended. Why? Because you have to ask, I'm sorry about the jokes, but let me pause here. Let me pause here, okay? I got another joke coming later. One of the problems with things that we see as addictions or things that we can't help when we really can, one of the problems is we give these things way too much power. We speak of them like gravity, like you're just going to get sucked in and there's nothing you can do and it's a mystery and how do you fight back? Maybe there are things like this, but being overweight is not one of them. It's a piece of cake to fix. There's another joke for you. So by treating it as something serious, it's not cancer, folks. You're just putting too much food in your mouth. It's really simple. And you got to speak about it like it really is, or you're giving it power it doesn't really have. Why do you overeat? Is it because you're hungry? It's not. If you have cravings, that's either a mental thing that has nothing to do with food, and we'll talk about that, or it's a nutritional thing that won't be solved by the kinds of food that you eat, and we'll talk about that. What about, is it because you like the taste of food? Some people are like, I just can't stop eating because it makes me feel good. It's not because of the taste of the food. And this is the case with every kind of so-called addiction. And this is why it's an honesty problem. What are you after? Because guess what? If eating did what you think it does for you, you would not be fat because you wouldn't have to eat so much to get it. People joke all the time about how the answer to the problems caused by big government is not bigger government. But that's what the government does, is they double down. Oh, we caused a problem. Houses are too expensive because of our policies. What do? Well, let's create low-income housing. The solution to a problem that you cause is not to double down on that cause. If you're eating because you're not satisfied by eating, the answer is not eating more. It's to find out what actually gives you what you're looking for. Leviticus 26:26 describes this. Believe it or not, it's right there in the Old Testament. When I have broken the staff of your bread, the Lord says, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver you your bread again by weight, and ye shall eat and not be satisfied. In other words, when you turn away from God, which we'll see why that's the case here, when you turn away from God, it doesn't matter how much you eat, you will not be able to fill the hole. Even if you had 10 women making bread for you, it wouldn't be enough. Have you ever tried to eat 10 loaves of bread in one sitting? I seriously doubt you could get through one. And still, you wouldn't be satisfied. Because it doesn't come from bread. Jesus said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. What's it called when you give something more than it deserves? It's called idolatry. It's called idolatry. And it's a very simplistic mistake to think that the only kind of idolatry, or even the most dangerous, is when you carve something out of wood and worship it. In Isaiah, we read about men worshiping the works of their own hands. It's not just talking about carving wood and praying to it. He's talking about when we place things at a higher importance than God would. And that's certainly what you're doing when you're overeating. Now, just to make this point crystal clear, stop pretending that it's an easier automatic thing to be overweight. It's not like some fairy comes in the middle of the night and injects fat into your stomach and butt. You put food in your mouth, and you put too much food in your mouth, and you chew it up and you swallow it. And you do it again and again and again, day after day, week after week, and month after month. It is not easy to gain weight. You have to do a lot over time, consistently, to gain weight. So what you're doing is exactly what's described in Isaiah 5:18, when it says, woe unto them that draw iniquity with cords of vanity, and sin as it were with a cart rope. You're walking up a hill with a rope tied to a cart, and you're hauling this thing uphill and saying you can't help it. Literally, all you have to do is let go of the rope, and all of your problems will go downhill. There are so many problems that are not so easy. This is not one of them. Isaiah 9:20 describes how things like this are cases of self-harm against opposition. So there's resistance. You actually have to try really hard to do it. And he shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry, and he shall eat on the left hand, and they shall not be satisfied. They shall eat every man the flesh of his own arm. Now, in context, it's talking about punishments coming on people and them literally being hungry and not having enough food to eat. But I want you to think about how hard it would be for you to eat your own arm. Every bite would cause you an immense amount of pain. It's a disgusting thought to begin with. Like, who wants to eat human flesh, let alone your own, right? Plus, you kind of need your arm. It's pretty important. So, how hard would it be to munch through your own arm to the point of not having an arm anymore? But that's exactly what you're doing if you're overweight. You're working against all this resistance. You need to go earn money. You need to go to the store and spend the money. You need to choose the food you eat that's high calorie and it's a bag of Doritos or something you can just plow through, because you can't do that with normal food. Just food that's made to not be satisfying, or satisfying in the wrong ways. Like it drives you to eat more instead of causing you to feel full. And then you eat it. You cook it. It takes so much effort to do all of that. To pretend that it's just sort of out of nowhere and some genie makes you fat. It's totally delusional. There was a show I saw once where this camera crew followed a lady who was morbidly obese, and she said, "Oh, I watch what I eat salads all the time. I don't know how I'm so fat." And they interviewed her and asked her what she ate in a day. And so the film crew followed her, and she was eating whole candy bars like 10 times a day. And she was so delusional that she didn't even admit that to herself. It's not easy to be fat. It's easy to lose fat because you literally have to do nothing. Here's the good news. God has deliverance for this. It's the easiest problem in the world to solve. Doesn't even take a miracle. The miracle is your body. You already have it. Isaiah 55:2 says, "Wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness." This is the solution to the problem. Turn to God, listen to Him, eat what is good, and be satisfied in what He offers. That's the solution to the problem. It's a spiritual problem. It has a spiritual solution. In Matthew 11:28, the Lord says, "Come unto me, all ye that are labor, and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Here's the other joke, being heavy laden, right? But the "come unto me" part is no joke. That's the solution to the problem. I will give you rest. Do you want to be satisfied? You'll find it in the Lord, not in what you eat. Psalms 22:26, "The meek shall eat and be satisfied. They shall praise the Lord that seek Him. Your heart shall live forever." If you seek the Lord, the result is you will find things worthy of praise. If you're meek, you will turn to God, and then you'll eat and be satisfied. Your heart, or your desire, shall live forever. It'll be in the way of truth, the way of light, the way that just gets better as you go down it. Let me ask you, does overeating get better the more you do it? It gets worse. You feel worse about yourself. You look worse. You feel worse. Doesn't matter how much you shove into the hole, it's not going to solve the problem. And this is one thing that fasting absolutely helps you with that's more than just biological. When you stop eating, you will realize much more how much food fails to fulfill what you're looking for. And I think the biggest lesson in that is probably when you break your fast, when you stop fasting. Because when you eat something, it doesn't all magically go away. When you fast, you realize how much fast is like makeup on the ugliness of your soul. It covers the problem, but not completely. And it doesn't make the problem go away. The problem is our distance from God. The problem is that we're here and not with Him. The problem is where our hearts are. And eating doesn't fix any of those problems. Eating will never fill the hole in your soul. Only God can do that. We see this promise again in Deuteronomy 14:29. It's part of the blessings of living according to his covenant. It says, "In the Levite, because he hath no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come and shall eat and be satisfied. And the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hand which thou doest." You'll eat and you'll be satisfied. God will bless you. So here's why it matters. Because what you put in your mouth shows what's in your heart. A person who overeats is not right in the heart. In Mark 7, we read, "And he saith unto them, Are ye so without understanding also? Do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him? Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. And he said, That which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile the man." And then in Matthew 6:21, he said, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So you value certain things, and you will desire what you value. If you think food is valuable, you'll eat it. A lot of it. Because that's what you'll desire. If you realize it can't fulfill your desire, only God can, you'll stop eating so much, and you'll turn to God for what you lack. Because you realize you can't find it in food. And as for this passage where Jesus was answering people that were telling him that he and his disciples were sinners for what they ate and drank. And he said, you can't sin by what you put into yourself. You sin from what comes out of you. You might use this passage to try to contradict my message here. But I would say this. What causes you to put it inside of you matters, because that comes out of you. It's what Jesus said. It's out of the heart of men. What you desire, where your treasure is. If you overeat, it shows that your treasure is not God. It's the flesh. And that's bad for more than just the obvious reasons. It's bad because you can never be satisfied that way. That road does not give you what you're looking for. It can't. And you already know that. That's the worst part about it. You've already tried it. It's not an open experiment. The experiment has failed miserably. And you're just doubling down on what you know doesn't work. This is not about looks alone. And this is why it absolutely matters, especially if you're married or you want to be. That's primarily where it matters. We shouldn't, fat people aren't lepers. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm saying if someone won't date you because you're overweight, or you're not getting any attention from the opposite sex because you're overweight, don't feel bad. Don't be angry about those people. They probably are shallow, and they're probably doing it for all the wrong reasons. But the right person would do it as well. And they would shun you for the right reasons. Again, not like a leper, but just not wanting to date you. It's for the right reasons, if it's a good person. And those are the reasons we talked about. Because you are wearing outside, you are wearing all the signs that you would not make a good spouse. Because you consistently do what you know does not do what you want it to do. And what does that foretell for a marriage? It means you're going to be a terrible husband, wife, father, or mother. Why? If you can't even control what you put in your mouth when it's just you and you're in the easiest part of your life you'll ever be in, because having a wife or husband and kids is way harder than being single. If you can't even control yourself in easy mode, how the heck can anyone expect you to be a decent spouse or parent? You're not going to magically become 100 times stronger. If you're delusional in that, you're going to be delusional in other things. You're not going to put other people's needs before your own. You can't even put down a donut. And donuts are really good, granted. But there's a time and a place. And you're using it for the wrong things. If you're a man and you're overweight, no woman should think that you will be willing to give your life for her, because you're not doing that now. You're putting the food in front of her. You haven't even met her yet, but you're still preferring the food because you're living your life in a way where you're not going to be attractive to her. If you're a woman, why would you think that any man is going to believe that you're going to dedicate yourself to his righteous purpose? You know, part of being a righteous woman is realizing that, and this is true for men, but less so. So a man's got to prioritize providing for his wife. A woman prioritizes looking beautiful for her husband. That's really important. Shouldn't be minimized. There's a playlist on here from a lady named Jane Farrar, I think. It's on the channel. You can look for it. And it's on womanhood. She's wonderful. The things she says are amazing. Go check it out. All right. Now we got through the spiritual side of this. We're going to talk about the temporal mechanics. It's really easy. We only have 2 more slides. This is everything you need to know about fasting. 1, exercise is a complete waste of time for weight loss. You can Google how many calories you burn through exercise. You have to be able to do it for hours and hours and hours, for days and days and days, and somehow not eat more the whole time. It's really, 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 really hard. There's tons and tons and tons of suffering for every pound that you lose. It's a massive time commitment that no one has time for that, okay? Especially if you have kids or a job. So, what do I recommend? And most people do fasting. And it's really easy, but you could totally mess this up. A lot of people, they do intermittent fasting. Here's the problem with that. You have 24 hours worth of calories stored in your muscles and your liver. And you will not burn any significant amount of fat until that's gone. So the on-ramp is 1 day of not eating any calories. That's when you start significant fat loss. So, just to be clear, what I'm not saying with all of this is if you have to lose 50 pounds, you should fast for 51 days. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you say do 4 days at a time, you will lose the weight so much faster and with so much less suffering than any other way. So maybe you want to do 2 days at a time or 3 days at a time, whatever works for you. But if you just do 1 day or less at a time, you're just going to be doing hardly anything. That's so much suffering for so little result, because you don't really start burning fat until you hit 24 hours of fasting. So, other than that, I highly recommend you start at dinner time. Why? Because then you get the benefit of the 8 hours of sleep where you're not even awake. It's just free fasting. And then I also suggest that you only end this in the morning. Why? Because then you get the night before for free as well. So my point with this is no matter how long you fast for, make sure you hit 2 nights. So always take the extra night is my point. Another thing to make clear, because some religious people are confused by this for reasons I don't understand. When I say fasting, I'm not talking about not drinking water. You actually have to drink way more water when you're fasting, because the chemical reaction for burning fat, it requires a lot of water. In all that, you might find it helpful to eat a pinch of salt every few hours. This is good for the electrolytes. It's good. I don't know all the science of it, but it makes it a little easier. And there's no calories in salt. Don't overdo it, but pinch of salt every few hours. And that's pretty much it. One other tip is that you may find it difficult to do your normal daily routine while fasting. You can do things like lift weights when fasting. I don't think it's a particularly beneficial thing to do, but it won't kill you. If you're going to exercise, walking is actually really great during fasting because it's low intensity enough that it won't really mess you up, but it will accelerate your fat loss. So it's a good way to pass time if you're looking for something to do while fasting. But I suggest that what you do, if you find it difficult to maintain your daily routine, look for and store up things that you can do while fasting that are still productive, but better suit your state of mind, because my brain gets quite cloudy when I fast. And I find it really difficult to continue the kind of mental load that I do each day with my routine. So some things that I find helpful are going for a hike or a walk, going and playing with my kids. I have a whole lot of clerical work that I can store up and do, processing notes and getting them typed into the computer, that sort of thing. Those are things that work well for me, but you will find that some things are equally the same as when you're not fasting. Some things will be easier. Some things are harder. And finally, here are some tips for maintaining weight. The secret is eat better and for the right reasons. The more I fast, the less satisfaction I find in normal food. That might sound like the opposite of what we were saying while we were going over scriptures. It's not. I'm more reconciled to what food actually provides than I was before. You know, I might have some dessert every once in a while, special occasions, whatever, but I only need a couple forks. Like after that, there's no change. I don't need anything else. It doesn't help me. But for the most part, my normal diet, doing things like what I'm about to tell you, have been super effective for me. I eat a lot of eggs. And I just boil them and then I keep them in the fridge. I boil more when I need more. And so instantaneously I can pop open the fridge, I can peel an egg and I can eat it. And I have a rule where I try to eat good food first. What do I mean by good food? Protein and fat. Protein and fat. So you can look up different ratios of this and everything else, but eggs are great because they're half and half. They're half protein, they're half fat. You get 7 grams of each with every egg and 0 carbs, and it's a complete protein. And so that's my go-to. Raw vegetables are good, like celery or carrots or whatever. Just something that you could chop up, have on hand. Because the more convenient it is, the more you're going to go to it. And routinizing your food is a wonderful thing. There are a lot of people who they look so forward to eating and they just get so into making meals. That's fine. It's got time and a place. But if you overeat, you should try to replace more of your calories with automatic food, where you're just eating to survive. You're not buying into the lie that it's going to fill the hole inside of you, because it's not. It doesn't work. So you might find it helpful to have a rule where you say, before I eat anything else, I'm going to have a hard-boiled egg and some vegetables, some raw vegetables. They don't have to be raw, but when you cook them, you add all sorts of stuff that outweigh the benefit of the low calories and high fiber of the vegetables. So, if you're going to eat a sandwich or some chips or something, just eat the good food first, and you'll find that you're way more full and satisfied, and you eat a lot less of the junk. That's pretty much it. I guess the only other tip I haven't mentioned on the slide is if you don't have it in your house, you're less likely to eat it. Now, I'm not a huge fan of avoidance as a method of repentance. I think that if you know why you do what you do and the reasons behind what is best, I think that's the absolute best way to change your behavior for the better. But the harder it is to do hard things, the less often you will do them. So if you have a counter full of chips, it's less likely that you're going to go for and you have no cooked eggs. It's less likely you're going to sit there and boil an egg when you're starving and wait for that. You're going to eat some chips, right? So the less junk you buy, the less available it is to you, the less you'll eat it. The main message I want to tell you is you 100% can do this. You absolutely can do this. It doesn't matter what your situation is, and it's not that hard. However much it's unpleasant, because I don't like fasting. I'll tell you straight up, I hate it. But it works, and I prefer fasting over being fat. And you should too. And the more you do it, and the more you get into where you should be for healthy weight, the more it will actually teach you the true cost of eating the junk. And so it's a positive feedback loop. You know, if you eat all these donuts and then you got to fast to get it off of you, the donuts aren't going to be worth as much, because you're going to say, man, I hate fasting. Maybe I don't like donuts as much as I thought, because you'll see the true cost. Seeing the true cost and true benefit of things in reality is one of the reasons why we're here. And learning to trust your brain and what you know, instead of your flesh, your body, and what your subconscious desires are telling you, to go eat that donut. It's very important. It's an important part of why we're here. So I hope this helps you, and I challenge you to go and do it.